I wasn't trying to snoop. Seriously. But when Derek Shaw, Senior VP of Strategic Vision, stood up to take a call, his smartwatch lit up right in front of me. One glance. That's all it took. A single notification glowed under the dim amber light of the rooftop restaurant. Let her close the Orion deal, then cut her. Sender Caleb Moreau, our brand new CEO, tone surgical, cold, like a hit order. I stared at the words, my wine glass hovering midair. My fingers tightened on the stem. I didn't need to scroll. I knew exactly who her was. I've spent the last 11 months architecting the biggest cross-media campaign Novolux has ever touched, $27 million of data-driven glory inked and nearly signed. And now, apparently, I'm the disposable middle step between celebration and silence. I'm Harper Lynn, 36 years old, born and raised in a small town in Vermont. Growing up through snow-heavy winters and creaky wooden houses, I didn't learn to stand out with flash. I learned to survive with grit by speaking less, doing more, and letting results speak for themselves. Maybe that's why for the past 11 years in the polished world of Novolux, I've always been seen as someone who's great, right where she is, but never the one they saw as important enough to truly matter. When Derek returned to the table, all easy charm, and that toothpaste commercial grin, he said, "Everything all right, Peachy," I said. My smile was smooth, slow, dangerous. Around us, the dinner hummed on. Executives from Orion Stream toasted to long-term vision, while a woman from their media planning team clinked glasses with Derek like we were at some wedding reception instead of the final hour of a corporate war. I nodded where I needed to, threw in a few lines about integrated performance analytics. I've done this dance 100 times. But this time something was off. Not the room. Me. Because I was now sitting across from a man I once mentored, yes mentored, and he was plotting to erase me like I was a placeholder in his pitch deck. Derek's posture had changed. He sat just a little too straight, glanced at his wrist every few seconds. The edge of sweat glistened at his temple. His laugh came late and never quite landed. But here's the thing, he wasn't afraid I'd break down. He was afraid I'd beat him at his own game. And he should be. Because while he was still rehearsing fake toasts and buzzwords, I was already recalculating the endgame, in real time. I looked around the table, laughter, wine, applause. All of it sounded like it was coming from down a long, echoing hallway I no longer belonged to. But I smiled anyway. Not for them, for me. Because that was the moment I stopped being the strategist they underestimated and started becoming something they'd never see coming. You know what's funny? I didn't even flinch when I read that text on Derek's watch. Not because it didn't hurt, but because I'd seen it coming. Just not in pixels this time. 3 years ago, we landed the LuxCloud campaign. $7 million international rollout, tight deadlines, and an ego-driven client who changed his mind every 3 days. Derek was nowhere in sight. He'd only been with us 5 months, still learning where the bathrooms were. I was the one on calls at 2 a.m. with our European partners. I was the one who rewrote the deliverables doc the night before signing. The execs sent me a nice email. Phenomenal work, Harper. Then gave the promotion to Derek. The logic. You're already excellent in your current role. Let's not disrupt that. Translation. You make us look good where you are. Why ruin that with a title? I didn't scream. I didn't quit. I did what women in my position are conditioned to do. I nodded, smiled, kept delivering, but it never stopped. 6 months ago, I spent 3 straight weekends building a strategy deck for GlintOS, a failing startup we were trying to rebrand after a data leak scandal. I mapped out messaging pivots, audience resegmentation, even scripted the CEO's apology video. Crickets. Not even a nice work. No mention in the press release. No internal memo. Later, I heard it from someone in HR, hushed tone, looking both ways. Leadership thinks you're a bit too sharp, too independent, harder to align with the broader culture. Of course, I wasn't playing the game. I wasn't asking for permission. And worst of all, I wasn't pretending the men in the room were smarter than they were. And that made me a liability. Because women like me, we don't wait for validation. We build without it. We see the cracks in the system and dare to point them out. And for that, we get sidelined, patted on the head, told we're high performers but not leadership material. Which in corporate language is just a cleaner way of saying we're afraid of what happens when you're finally in charge. Derek. He learned early how to say the right things in the right tone with just enough vague jargon to sound visionary. He knew how to lean back in his chair and nod like a thinker. But when it came time to actually build, he was always behind a locked door or circling back next week. And yet every time a headline came out, every time a client praised the work, guess who got quoted? Not the builder, the brand. I told myself I didn't care, that the work spoke for itself. But sitting at that rooftop table, knowing they planned to gut me right after I handed over the last piece of the puzzle. Yeah, it hit different. I took a sip of my wine. Smooth, expensive, tasted like irony. All these years, and they still didn't understand the cost of underestimating someone like me. But they would, sooner than they think. The dinner was a performance, nothing more. Derek raised his glass like he was toasting world peace, flashing that smooth press kit smile he wore when cameras were nearby. Here's to bold collaboration and the power of shared vision, he declared. Sure, shared vision. Where I do the building and he does the bragging. I lifted my glass when everyone else did, even nodded at the right moments. But inside I was ice. By dessert, my face ached from holding the same polite smile. My ears tuned out the buzz of marketing jargon and meaningless pleasantries. And then it happened. The waiter returned with another round of wine, cheerful as ever. He glanced at me and said, bright as daylight, loud enough for the whole table, always a pleasure serving the CEO and her team. The table chuckled, except for one person. I didn't need to look at Derek to feel it. The air shifted. His hand froze on the stem of his glass. His knuckles whitened, jaw clenched, smile gone. And for the first time all evening, I felt warm. He didn't correct the waiter, couldn't, because deep down everyone at that table already knew. This project was mine. My vision, my deck, my timeline, my call with Orion's CTO at 11:47 p.m. last Tuesday. Derek had just been the guy who swooped in when the papers were nearly signed. He was there for optics, for legacy photos and press mentions, but substance that lived on my hard drive. And now he knew I knew. He sat straighter after that, checked his watch more often. His voice started rising slightly above its usual, I'm totally in control volume. When one of Orion's execs complimented our rollout model, Derek cut in. Yes, that framework was a joint effort between Harper and myself. Joint effort. Sure, Derek, you joined the effort the moment it became profitable, but I didn't challenge him. Not yet. Because here's what most people never understand about quiet people. We're not timid. We're calculating. And in that moment, I realized I didn't need to interrupt him. I just needed to let him keep talking. The more he did, the more obvious it became he was clinging to a spotlight he didn't even help build. And the second that light moved, he'd disappear. The rest of dinner was autopilot. I let Derek dominate the conversation, let the Orion team smile and nod, let the applause land where it always did, on the guy with the louder voice and cleaner suit. But under the table, my fingers tapped the side of my wine glass. Not nervously, rhythmically, like a countdown. Because what Derek and Caleb didn't know was that I wasn't planning to fight them on their terms. They were expecting tantrums, exit interviews, maybe a legal threat or two. But I wasn't here to rage. I was here to remember. Every detail, every smirk, every line they'd rehearsed to sell me short. And when the time came, I'd use all of it. Not to break them, to outbuild them. It was supposed to be just another off-the-record coffee. Julian Cross had a habit of requesting casual meetings like this. No slides, no agendas, just espresso and conversation. We'd met a handful of times over the years, always professional, always polished. He had that disarming COO charm, sleeves rolled, wedding band glinting, and a look that said he'd read your strategy document twice before even setting the meeting. That morning, the White Brick Cafe on East 44th was quiet, the kind of place where conversations stayed between tables and nobody took calls on speaker. Julian arrived 5 minutes early, no assistant, no laptop bag. Just him, his watch, and that signature steel-eyed focus. He sat across from me, smiled like always. "Appreciate you making the time." "Always," I said, brushing a lock of hair behind my ear. "Anything to keep the Orion timeline on track." I expected a question about rollout logistics, maybe a nudge on pricing alignment. Instead, he leaned in slightly, voice low but firm. "Can I ask you something? Personal?" I blinked. "Sure. Why are you still at Nova Lux?" I paused, letting the question hang in the air like steam off my cappuccino. I could have laughed, could have deflected, could have recited something about loyalty, stability, the importance of long-term partnerships. But Julian didn't break eye contact, and he wasn't fishing for compliments. "Excuse me," I said slowly. He shrugged lightly. "I've seen your work, Harper. The decks you've led, the ones with your fingerprints on them, they're clean, surgical. The risk models are elegant. Your numbers speak louder than your boss ever does." And between us, he leaned back just enough to cross one leg over the other. "Some of the deliverables Derek sent, they weren't his. They were yours. Weren't they?" I hesitated. The bitterness bubbled under the surface like a kettle just before boil. But I kept my voice calm. That's how teams work. Shared credit. Julian didn't flinch, didn't even blink. "You deserve better than shared credit." I looked down at my hands, polished nails, slight ink stain on my middle finger left over from marking up legal clauses at midnight. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me was flattered, the other part suspicious. "Look," he continued, "I'm not trying to meddle in your career, but if you ever get tired of being underestimated, if you ever decide to build something of your own—" He leaned forward again. This time his voice softened, not out of pity, but something closer to belief. We'd back it. No hesitation. There it was. A door I hadn't even dared to name, cracked open. I gave a small practiced laugh. "That's a generous hypothetical." "I don't do hypotheticals," he said. "Not when I've already turned down deals from people less capable than you." That stopped me. "What do you mean?" He took a sip of his espresso, slow and measured. "Last year, Derek pitched us on an automation campaign. On paper, it looked shiny, slick slides, catchy slogans. But the deeper we looked, conflict of interest with one of your subcontractors, vague deliverables, supplier chain inconsistencies. We asked for clarification. He raised an eyebrow, got deflection. My stomach tightened. I remember that project internally. It was framed as a near miss A. They just weren't ready to scale situation. No one told me they walked because of Derek. No one ever tells you the part that matters when it matters most. Julian's tone softened again. "I'm telling you this because I believe in builders, not just talkers. And what I've seen in you," he nodded, "you build. That's rare." The waiter brought over our food. Neither of us touched it. I tried to play it cool, forced a smile, kept it light. But my mind was spinning. Not from flattery. From the unsettling possibility that everything I'd poured into Nova Lux had always been invisible to the people who signed the checks, but not to the people who mattered. That conversation should have been forgettable. Just words over espresso and reclaimed wood. But 2 months later, after a rooftop dinner and a silent betrayal glowing on a smartwatch, it meant everything. Julian had seen it. Not just the numbers. Me. And that quiet question, the one I didn't answer that day, had begun to echo louder and louder in my chest ever since. What if I could? I told no one. Not my mother. Not the friends I used to trade weekend brunches for 3 a.m. pitch decks. Not even Lena, who, if I'm honest, probably knew before I did. There's something sacred about the first quiet act of rebellion. It doesn't come with trumpets or flashing signs. Just a decision made in silence and a browser history full of business license regulations, tax structures, and copyright law. That's how it started. In the middle of a Tuesday night after everyone else had logged off and Slack had gone still, I searched for things like how to form an LLC without getting flagged. What does clean ownership really mean? Anonymous founding structures, legal. I wasn't trying to be sneaky. I was trying to be ready. Because here's the thing, people like Derek and Caleb, they don't fire you with noise. They fire you with precision, timing. You don't get a memo. You get a missing calendar invite, a deactivated badge, silence where your name used to be. So I planned for that. Enter Samuel Yates, former compliance lead at Nova Lux, the guy who once flagged a C-suite expense scheme and got told to tone it down or move on. He moved on. When I reached out, I wasn't sure he'd remember me. He did. You want something airtight, he asked, spinning a pen between his fingers during our first meeting. No shortcuts, no trails, no chance they can claw it back. Exactly. Good. Then let's build something they can't touch. We filed the LLC under a neutral holding name, Atlas Ember, drawn from my middle name and my grandfather's old fishing vessel. No direct ties, no flashy branding, just structure, protection, legitimacy. The bank account came next, a local credit union tucked on the edge of downtown. The woman at the desk smiled warmly when I slid the paperwork across. You opening this for your family? She asked. Something like that. No social posts, no team, no logo etched in frosted glass. Just a number, a password, and a name that for the first time belonged solely to me. It didn't feel like a company yet. It felt like a container, a clean slate with edges still undefined. But I knew what I was building. Not a brand, not a protest, a way out. Because I wasn't playing both sides. I was preparing for the moment when they'd leave me with no side at all. And when that day came, I wouldn't scramble. I wouldn't beg. I'd walk no step into something I had built with my own hands under my own name and on my own terms. No more borrowed titles, no more ghost-written credit. They could keep their corner office power plays. I had something better. A blueprint they didn't know existed. Yet. I wasn't supposed to be there. Not that late. Not alone. Not standing in front of a glowing server rack watching the backup logs scroll like digital Morse code as if they might blink out the answers I hadn't said out loud. I hadn't touched anything yet. I was just staring, thinking. Half of me still believed I could finish this cleanly, wrap up the Orion deal, smile through the final meeting, walk out with my head high and my legacy intact. The other half was standing in a server room at 11:46 p.m., holding a flash drive and trying to breathe through the weight of what came next. That's when I heard her. You're not really watching backup logs for fun, right? I turned sharply. Lena. She was leaning in the doorway, arms folded, expression unreadable. Her long braids pulled back, hoodie, half-zipped sneakers quiet on the tile. She didn't look surprised. She looked ready. I opened my mouth reflexively, instinctively to lie. Just some admin cleanup. She raised an eyebrow. That's the worst lie I've ever heard you tell. I didn't answer, just exhaled and looked back at the screen. She stepped closer, voice low. Whatever it is, I'm in, unless you tell me not to be. It landed so simply. No fanfare, no pressure. Just an open door offered by someone who'd seen everything they needed to see and still chose to walk toward me. For a second, I hesitated, because trusting someone means giving up just a little control, and I'd spent too long building without it. But then I reached into my bag, pulled out the USB drive, and held it out. No label, just black plastic warm from my palm. No names, no details, just files I created, client decks, budget models. My own versions, nothing proprietary, nothing signed, just mine. Lena took it without flinching. Give me 2 hours. She didn't ask questions, didn't offer a pep talk. She just moved smooth, silent, surgical. While most of the office was scrolling dinner menus or watching cat videos in their cubicles, Lena slipped into the operations terminal like she belonged there, which she did. More than half the technical issues we solved in the past year, Lena fixed them before anyone else noticed they existed. I sat in the corner watching the soft glow of her monitor reflect off her glasses. We didn't talk much. There was nothing to explain. After 90 minutes, she ejected the drive, double-checked the file partitions, and walked over. Clean copy, no metadata. You're good. I took it slow. The drive felt heavier now, like it carried not just files, but truth. Thank you, I said, quiet but firm. She paused, then looked me straight in the eye. Whatever you're building, it's already stronger than what they think they own. I nodded. She didn't wait for a response. As she turned to leave, I felt something shift. Not in the room in me. A steadying. A click. Because in a world where so many people smiled and stayed silent while I was being erased, Lena had stepped in. Not for glory or credit, just to say in her own quiet way, I see you. And sometimes that's all it takes for the first layer of doubt to fall away. I sat there in the dark USB drive, cold in my hand, knowing that this wasn't the end of something. It was the foundation, not revenge, not rebellion, readiness. And now I wasn't building it alone. The contract was flawless. $27 million, a multi-year partnership with Orion Stream, final version, reviewed, vetted, every clause sharpened like glass. All I had to do was click send, but I didn't, because something in me, something old, something scarred, hesitated. That's when Lena slipped in, moving like a shadow into the doorway of the conference room. No knock, no hesitation. You haven't sent it yet, right? I blinked. No. Why? She stepped closer, voice low but tight. I just heard something. HR's finalizing the Q4 restructure list. Your name's in the draft. Time didn't stop. It just slowed. 1 second, I was staring at a screen worth more than half the company's projected revenue next quarter. The next, I was staring at my own erasure already in motion. They weren't waiting for the ink to dry. They were waiting for the click. Are you sure I asked, though? I already knew the answer. Lena nodded, eyes narrowed. Not 100%, but I trust my source. And you don't want to find out the hard way. I closed my laptop without another word. No grand speech, no dramatic sigh. Just the quiet sound of metal meeting metal as the hinge clicked shut. Because now it was clear they wanted the glory, the press, the profit. And then they'd walk me out with a box and a security escort if I was lucky. I looked at Lena. She didn't speak, didn't push. She didn't have to. She'd brought the final piece of proof I didn't know I was waiting for. For years, I'd been taught to deliver first and ask questions later, but not this time. This time I'd learned that sometimes the only thing more powerful than pressing send is choosing not to. Thanks, Lena, I said quietly. She gave me a tight nod, then disappeared down the hallway before anyone could see her. I sat there in the low, light hands resting on the closed laptop, not defeated, not panicked, still. And then I crossed my arms and leaned back in the chair. I had built the deal. I had the client's trust. And now I had the leverage. They just didn't know it yet. The building looked the same that morning. Same sterile lobby, same security guard giving me that half-smile nod. Same elevator with the soft mechanical chime that I'd heard nearly every weekday for 5 years. I even had my usual stainless steel coffee tumbler in hand because some part of me still hoped this was all a misunderstanding. But I knew better. The air outside my office felt hollow, like the pressure had shifted. I sat down, opened my laptop. Nothing. My login screen blinked once, then glitched. I typed again. Access denied. I froze. Not in fear, just in confirmation. A second later, my phone buzzed with a new email. From HR. No greeting, no subject line, no signature. Just 5 clipped lines. Your employment with Novolux Media is terminated effective immediately. Your credentials have been deactivated. Do not attempt to access company systems. HR will contact you to coordinate offboarding. That was it. Not a thank you. Not even a farewell. 5 years of nights, weekends, wins, and crisis control erased in 33 words. I stared at the screen, letting the numbness settle in like static behind my eyes. Then my Slack logged out. My inbox vanished. My calendar wiped itself clean. That's when the panic tried to creep in. Not fear for my future. Grief for what I'd let myself believe. I'd given them everything, my strategy, my leadership, my loyalty, and this was their response. Then another buzz. Lena, they cut you off. Just found out. I'm done. I'm leaving. I won't stand here and smile while they erase you. Then another. Sarah, a junior analyst I'd mentored last year, saw the HR update. They reassigned your entire portfolio to Derek. Not a single mention of you. It's like you were never here. I looked down at my desk. The sunlight was hitting it just right, soft and golden and cruel. And there it was, a manila envelope, no label, just sealed, like someone had wanted it to be missed by anyone but me. Inside was a USB drive, and a yellow sticky note in Lena's handwriting. You'll need this. It's everything you built. My throat tightened, not because of the betrayal, but because in the one moment I felt most invisible, someone still saw me. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just packed. The framed certificate from Columbia, a coffee mug that said, "Strategy is sexy, a gag gift from an old intern," my notebooks, my pen, the chair cushion I'd brought in myself because the standard ones killed my back. No one stopped me. No one said a word. I passed Derek in the hallway on the way out. He offered me that same smug smile he wore when taking credit for my work, and muttered, "Hope everything works out." It wasn't kindness. It was a performance, a final act for an audience that no longer existed. I didn't answer, didn't need to, because he thought this was the end. But I wasn't walking out empty-handed. They took my title, but I had the client, I had the trust, and now thanks to Lena, I had the work. And they had no idea what I was about to do with all of it. The apartment was too quiet, no Slack pings, no late-night calendar reminders, no Derek emails marked urgent with nothing inside but a recycled bullet list and a half-baked metaphor about synergy. Just me, a cooling mug of black coffee, and a PDF file named Orion Contract Final Nova Lux V27. I stared at it for a long time, not with dread, with clarity. I opened it, scrolled to the bottom. The signature block still had the Nova Lux logo, clean, corporate, sharp-edged. I deleted it, and in its place I typed Atlas Ember LLC Authorized Representative Harper Lynn Founder and Chief Strategist. I sat back, let the screen glow in the dim morning light. My name, no edits, no fine print, no on behalf of. This time it was mine. I opened a new message to Julian Cross, kept it short, clean, like the file. Subject, RNR signature ready. Thank you for your patience. I'm ready. 3 minutes later, his reply hit my inbox like a quiet drumbeat. Approved. Announcement scheduled for Friday. Congratulations, Harper. This is the right move. Julian. I didn't smile. I didn't need to. Instead, I took a slow sip of my coffee and turned toward the window. Below, the city moved as if nothing had changed, but something had. And not just for me. By Friday, the media would break the story. Nova Lux would scramble. There would be calls, emails, maybe even an emergency all hands. But by then, it would be too late. Because the contract was no longer just a business win. It was a message. To every strategist told to stay behind the scenes. To every woman coached to be less sharp or more collaborative. To every builder watching their work be repackaged under someone else's name. I didn't need revenge. I had a signature, I had a company, and now I had the deal. And the moment my name went live, that was the moment they'd finally know they didn't cut me loose. They cut me free. It started at 9:04 a.m. with a headline. Orion Stream signs 27 Malers AI deal with Atlas Ember. Nova Lux not named. Tech Edge Daily. A simple line, a quiet earthquake. I read it once, then again. No spin, no quotes from Derek, no familiar PR fluff, Just a photo of Julian Cross shaking hands with a faceless woman cropped from the shoulders down, just enough to make them wonder. And it worked. By 9:15, the calls began. Blocked numbers, former colleagues, one journalist I hadn't spoken to since the Glint OS rebuild. I ignored every single one. Then my screen flashed. Derek Shaw, call, then another, then 5, all sent to voicemail. Seconds later, Lena texted. He just slammed his laptop shut, cracked the screen. PR is scrambling. Michelle Voss from Comms literally asked, "Who the hell is Atlas Ember?" I exhaled through my nose. Not a laugh, something heavier. They weren't prepared, not just for the name, for the silence, because I hadn't announced anything. I hadn't made noise. All I did was show up with the facts. And suddenly that was louder than anything they'd ever published. Then came the emails. The first was from Tanya Reid, procurement lead at Veltonics, a partner I'd negotiated with for 3 quarters straight. Harper just saw the news. No idea what happened with Novolux, but we're shifting our entire account to Atlas Ember. We weren't loyal to the brand, we were loyal to you. Then Damien Xu, CTO at a health tech firm I'd onboarded last spring. Not surprised to see you behind the Orion deal. We always knew the thinking wasn't coming from your boss. Tell us what we need to migrate. Then came Priya Nair, systems head at Cast Iron Logistics. Harper finally. Let's skip the small talk. You were always the reason we stayed during that vendor mess last year. Let us know when we can make the switch. P.S. I hope Lena's with you. That girl's sharper than half the men I've worked with. I stared at the screen, letting each line hit. They remembered. They hadn't followed Novolux. They'd followed me, all those years of late emails, emergency decks, red-eye flights to fix what Derek didn't even know was broken. They hadn't disappeared into some corporate void. They had roots, and now those roots were pulling up the foundation Novolux thought was unshakable. Lena messaged again, "We building a new client wall, yet because these emails deserve their own frame." I smiled just a little, not the grin of revenge, something quieter, the kind of smile you wear when the truth finally has room to speak. And they had no idea what was coming next. It arrived the next morning, hand-delivered, heavy cardstock, embossed Novolux letterhead, that faint watermark their legal department uses to feel important. Inside, in neatly justified paragraphs, was the message. This correspondence serves as formal notice of pending legal action against Harper Lynn and Atlas Ember LLC for client interference, misappropriation of proprietary strategy, and breach of contractor ethics. They didn't even bother to personalize the last paragraph. Copy-paste legalese at its finest. No surprise. Desperation rarely writes well. I slid the letter across my desk to Samuel Yates, who was finishing his second espresso across from me in our new shared workspace downtown. He didn't even read the first page, just skimmed the second flip to the signature and chuckled. "Matthew Ivers," he said aloud. "They really let him sign this." I raised an eyebrow. "You know him." Samuel leaned back, adjusting his glasses. He was my intern, fresh out of law school, bright but jumpy. I once caught him trying to file a draft NDA in Comic Sans. He looked back at the letter. "Guess they're putting the kids in charge now?" I let out a slow breath, not quite a laugh. "So can they touch us?" He shook his head. "Not a chance. They shot themselves in the foot the moment they labeled you a contractor." "Right. That choice. That convenient classification they used to avoid paying me benefits, healthcare, or a proper severance plan. Every time I asked about full-time status, the answer was always, 'We're evaluating. Soon. We love your flexibility.' Translation: you're disposable but polite enough not to push." Well, they were right about one thing. I had been polite. Until now. Samuel opened a folder and laid out everything. My original contractor agreement, my 1099 forms, a clause they'd conveniently forgotten: no intellectual property retention unless explicitly transferred in writing. "They don't own your work," he said. "You do." By noon, he'd drafted a response that was sharp, clinical, and devastating. He closed with a single line: "My client will not be intimidated by a company that refused to recognize her value on paper or otherwise." I stared at the sentence for a beat, then read it again. It wasn't angry. It didn't need to be. It just stood there like a mirror held up to their hypocrisy. I forwarded it to Lena. A minute later, her reply came back. They picked the wrong person to threaten. I smiled faintly and typed, "They picked the wrong person to ignore." That night, I slept deeper than I had in weeks. Not because I'd won anything, but because I didn't have to scream to be heard. This time, the law spoke for me, and it said everything I didn't need to say out loud. The sunlight poured into my office like a soft declaration. It caught the edges of the framed photo behind my desk, the same screenshot I'd straightened every morning since this space became mine. Let her close the deal, then cut her. No sender, no timestamp, just words. Ugly, inevitable. And the reason I was here? I turned when the door opened. Nicole. It was my mother, carefully stepping in one hand, clutching her purse, the other balancing a small paper bag. Still warm, she smiled. "Blueberry. I know you like them better than you admit." I walked over and wrapped my arms around her. She held me longer than usual. Her hair smelled like the same lavender she used when I was little. She looked around the room, slow, thoughtful. Took in the clean lines, the ficus by the window, the stack of portfolios, the whiteboard filled with ideas I hadn't yet spoken aloud. But her eyes landed on the frame behind my chair. She walked toward it, squinted, read, then exhaled. "They didn't fire you," she said, quiet but unshakable. "They freed you." I swallowed hard, then nodded once, not because I needed her to be right, because I knew she already was. That was when my screen lit up. 5 emails, 5 subject lines, 5 transfers, Veltonics, Cast Iron, Glint OS, Halcyon Health, Borealis Mobility. 5 of our top clients now fully moved over to Atlas Ember. I turned the screen toward her. "They've officially walked," I said. She blinked. "All of them," I nodded. Valuation just crossed 2.5 times Nova Lux's last market cap. She laughed softly, but her eyes welled anyway. "You didn't just step off their path, Harper. You drew a whole new map." We stood there for a moment, just letting it sink in. Outside the window, the city kept rushing by, cars, sirens, deals being pitched, backs being patted. But in here, there was stillness. Not the fragile kind, the kind that holds. I reached for her hand and gave it a gentle squeeze. "I don't need them to believe in me anymore." She looked at me, eyes full of the kind of pride that doesn't need to be spoken. "I just need to keep going." And I would. Because they tried to erase me with a message, and I turned it into a mission. They wrote me off, and I wrote something better. Sometimes I still wake up early even when I don't have to. Old habits, early meetings, that quiet voice that used to whisper, "Be the first one in so they'll take you seriously." I don't need that voice anymore, but I let it stay, because it reminds me of who I was before I learned how to leave. It's been 6 months since Atlas Ember went live. We've signed 8 new clients. Lena leads our systems division now. She built her own team. Quietly, brilliantly. Samuel still checks in every few weeks, usually with a folder full of things he says are just in case, but always ends with, "But you're good, you're covered. We've stopped waiting for permission." That's what this was really about. Not revenge, not even recognition. Freedom. To build, to lead, to choose who gets to sit at the table with you and who doesn't. Sometimes I look at that framed message behind my desk, the one that almost ended me. Let her close the deal, then cut her. And I think, good. They did. They cut me free of the cage I was never meant to shrink inside. And if you're reading this or listening to this and you're still there, still nodding politely, still swallowing what burns, still wondering if it's you, it's not you. They see your strength. That's why they try to keep you small. Don't let them. Your worth doesn't live in someone else's title, or email signature, or round of applause. It lives in the work you've done quietly, the ideas they reused without credit, the nights you stayed and saved what they didn't even understand was broken. And when you're ready, you don't have to burn the building down. You just have to walk out the front door and start building your own. I'll be here. We all will, waiting to welcome you on the other side. A thumb tum cow, https www.youtube.com, watch V3ZBR4QXQK0. Xan, my CEO, fired me by text during a party celebrating a $27 million deal. Trang, I built the entire strategy, every slide, every call. Zan, he just showed up for the photo. Chu Trang to can't stay quiet. Oh Mao Zhou, the 27 million contract will belong to me. B CEO fired me by text at the biggest deal party. Then I signed it under my own company. If you're into dramatic twists, office kamar, and emotionally charged stories, this channel is for you. Don't forget to like and subscribe, thank you. Your Reddit story, your revenge stories, your audio story, your CEO fired me, your revenge karma, your office drama. Disclaimer. This is a work of fiction. Its purpose is to foster meaningful discussions and promote empathy, respect, and understanding across all communities.